"You're a burden, Mom. Go to a nursing home or get out of my house." Mark's voice hit me like cold water over the skull, sharp, sudden, humiliating. The plate slipped from my hand into the sink, water splashing my sleeves. I stood there with soapy fingers staring at the window above the faucet where birds hopped across the fence as if the world hadn't just fallen apart. My son, my only son, stood in the doorway of the kitchen, jaw-tight eyes cold in a way I'd never seen before, and behind him, his wife Heather folded her arms and smirked like she'd been waiting for this moment. The kitchen smelled of dish soap and leftover spaghetti. The afternoon sun cut in through the blinds, striping the floor in warm orange. I had just finished washing their lunch dishes, his plate, her plate, the children's half-eaten nuggets like I did every day. My knees ached, my back ached, but I always pushed through. That's what mothers do, isn't it? We keep going even when pieces of us fall off. But that day, something snapped quietly like thread worn thin, slow, soft, final. Mark stepped closer, running a hand through his hair, nervous, frustrated. I talked to Heather's mom, he said, not meeting my eyes. There's a place in Willow Creek, assisted living with open beds. They have activities, nurses' bingo nights. It's nice. Heather cut in, voice sweet like artificial sugar. It'll be better for you there, Maria. You'll have friends your age instead of being stuck here. You deserve a place that understands old people. Old people. Burden. I stared at my reflection in the microwave door, the lines in my cheeks, the gray in my hair. I never bothered to dye after John died. I looked small, smaller than I ever wanted to be. "I thought I was helping," I said quietly. "I cook, I clean, I watch the kids." Heather shrugged. "We didn't ask you to. You just do it." A stab, quick and cruel. Mark's voice hardened. "Mom, this isn't working. The house is crowded. The kids need space. You forget things. Yesterday you left the stove on." I blinked. I hadn't. I knew I hadn't. But I also knew there was no point arguing with a story Heather already planted in his head. I steadied my breath, wiped my wet hands on my apron, and then I did something they didn't expect. I smiled. Not a happy smile, a tired, broken, bone-deep smile, a smile that said, "I see. I finally see." "All right," I whispered. "I'll pack." Heather's eyebrows jumped surprise first, then satisfaction. Mark blinked, taken aback, like he'd expected begging or tears. But the tears didn't come. Not yet. Maybe I had cried them all in the past years quietly into my pillow in the basement room they called my space, but felt more like storage. I walked slowly down the narrow staircase to the basement. Each step creaked under my weight. That room, bare walls, concrete smell, one tiny window facing the side of the house held what was left of my life. A small bed, a dresser, a box of old photographs, a wooden jewelry box John gave me on our 10th anniversary. I sat on the bed's edge and ran my hands over the faded quilt. My hands trembled not from fear, but age. 68 years lives in these fingers. 68 years of serving tables, scrubbing floors, sewing hems to pay rent. 38 years of marriage. 1 son, 2 grandkids. A house I sold to help him buy this one. I opened my closet. 3 cardigans, 2 dresses, a winter coat, scarves I knitted during long nights alone. I folded each piece carefully, pressing out wrinkles with my palm. Packing clothes feels like sealing memories into silence. My phone buzzed my friend Linda texting coffee tomorrow. I stared at the message. I almost wrote back, "I'm leaving," but stopped. Something inside told me to wait. Photographs went into my suitcase, John in his uniform when he was young, Mark in kindergarten, holding a crooked ceramic pot he made for Mother's Day, me blowing candles at 50 while everyone cheered, little shards of life, proof that I once mattered. When I finished packing, I zipped the suitcase and sat still for a long moment. The basement hummed with the house heater kicking in. I could hear footsteps above Heather's heels, children laughing faintly, Mark pacing. A part of me expected someone to knock on my door and say I didn't mean it, stay, but silence answered instead. 1 hour later, I climbed back upstairs. Mark and Heather sat on the living room couch, she scrolling her phone, he staring at the muted TV. When they saw me with the suitcase, Heather smiled with a satisfied little curl of her lips. Mark swallowed hard. I lifted my chin. I'm ready. Before either responded, the doorbell rang. Mark frowned. Who's that now? He walked to the door, annoyance in his steps. He swung it open. And the world shifted. A sleek black limousine glistened in the driveway like something out of a dream. A man in a pressed black suit stood beside it, holding the rear door open. Sunglasses, white gloves, professional posture. Mark froze. Heather's face drained of color. The suited man nodded respectfully at me. Ms. Maria Rossi. My breath hitched. That name spoken like dignity, like respect. Yes, I managed. He stepped aside, and from the limo emerged a tall, older gentleman. Silver hair, deep blue suit, posture strong despite age. My heart stumbled. Richard Lawson, John's business partner, our friend for decades, a man I hadn't seen in years. He smiled warmly as though he'd been waiting for this moment. Maria, he said softly, are you ready? Heather's jaw dropped. Mark's face turned paper white. I held the suitcase handle tighter, lifted my chin, and walked toward the limo. You want to know why the richest man I know came to pick up a woman her own son called a burden? Why my life changed the moment I stepped into that car? Stay with me, because this story is only beginning. The door shut behind me with a soft thud as I stepped into the limousine, leaving Mark and Heather frozen on the porch like two porcelain figures. The leather seat embraced me as I sank in, still gripping my old suitcase like a shield. My heart pounded so loud I could hear it in my ears. I wasn't used to luxury. Most of my life smelled like dish soap and laundry powder, not polished mahogany and cologne. Richard slid into the seat across from me, his eyes kind but searching. He looked older than I remembered, more silver in his hair, deeper lines around his mouth, but the same steadiness lived in his gaze. I'm glad you called me back last week, he said, voice low. I had a feeling something wasn't right. I cleared my throat. I didn't think you'd come. I just wanted someone to talk to. My voice quivered despite myself. He smiled gently. Maria, when John died, he asked me to check in on you from time to time. I haven't done that as faithfully as I should have. His eyes softened with regret. But I intend to make up for that. The city passed outside the tinted window rows of identical houses, fading into highways, then tall buildings climbing into the sky. My chest felt tight like a balloon stretched too thin. How had life shifted so drastically in just one afternoon? I leaned my head back and closed my eyes, and memories, good ones, painful ones, came rushing like old film reels. I was 22 when I first met John Rossi. His laugh filled a room before he even walked in. He smelled like sawdust, and motor oil from the workshop always had splinters in his hands from carpentry jobs. But his smile was warm, the kind that makes you feel safe. We married in a small church in Newark with plastic flowers and a borrowed veil. We didn't have money, but we had hope, and sometimes that's enough to start a life. We rented a tiny apartment back then. The kitchen was so small that if John opened the fridge, I had to squeeze sideways to pass. Still, we laughed. We danced in socks to Sinatra records. We saved every dollar in a jar above the fridge labeled Future. Eventually, we bought our first house, peeling paint, leaky pipes, but it was ours. And we fixed it with love. When Mark was born, I stitched his blankets myself. I worked 2 diner shifts a day, pouring coffee for truck drivers, wiping counters, smiling, even when my feet bled in my shoes. John built up the construction business with Richard Lawson and Rossi Contractors. They were unstoppable. 2 young men with calloused hands and big dreams. Business boomed. We never became rich, but we lived comfortably. Until the day John collapsed on the job site. Heart attack. 56 years old. The funeral smelled like lilies and rain. I thought grief might kill me too. Mark was 25 then, bright, ambitious, full of ideas about expanding the company. Richard guided him like a second father, but Heather entered the picture soon after. Pretty, polished, corporate sharp. She wore heels taller than her kindness. She and Mark married fast, too fast. I smiled through the wedding pictures, even though Heather's mother looked at me like I was the help. At first, things were okay. I visited on weekends, made lasagna for dinner, babysat when asked. But over the years, invitations became obligations, then inconveniences. After I retired, the house felt too quiet. I missed noise. I missed being needed. One day, Mark said, "Mom, why don't you move in with us, sell your house? Use the money to help us upgrade. You'll never be alone again." His voice sounded hopeful, like a boy asking me to stay for Christmas morning again. My heart swelled. I thought, family. I thought we'd eat dinner together, watch movies, bake cookies with the kids. I imagined my old age wrapped in warmth, not loneliness. So I sold my house, the home John and I built from nothing. The small brick place with the creaky third stair and the rose bush I planted when Mark started kindergarten. I sold it for $240,000. After fees, I handed most of it to Mark, and he used it as a down payment on the big suburban house. A family home, he said. I moved into the basement to give the kids the bedrooms. They promised to renovate it later. They never did. Still, I cooked dinner. I folded laundry. I read bedtime stories. I drove the kids to school. I packed lunches exactly how they liked, crusts, cut off dinosaur notes tucked inside. I watched them grow. But Heather's comments grew too. "This isn't a Hotel Maria. You're not young anymore. Let me handle this. She forgets things. It's worrying. She should contribute more." Contribute more. I had already given everything. I opened my eyes in the limo, throat tight. Maybe I made it too easy for them, I murmured. Maybe I should have said no sometimes. Richard watched me carefully. "Love makes us give freely," he said. "But there's a line between generosity and exploitation. They crossed it." I swallowed the lump in my throat. I don't want revenge. I wanted to be loved, like I used to be. The limo slowed beneath towering buildings. We pulled into the underground garage of a luxury high-rise, polished concrete gold lighting. When the door opened, warm air brushed my face, scented faintly of eucalyptus like a spa. Two concierge staff greeted Richard by name. "Good evening, Mr. Lawson." They looked at me with curiosity, not pity, respect, something I hadn't felt in years. Up the private elevator we rode. My reflection in the mirrored walls looked different. Older, yes, but steadier, like I was waking from a long sleep. The penthouse door opened to a world I never imagined, a sweeping living room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the skyline. Marble counters, soft rugs, city lights sparkling like stars fallen to earth. A grand piano sat in the corner. The air hummed with quiet wealth. Richard gently placed my suitcase beside a guest room door. "This room is yours for as long as you need it," he said. "No rush, no expectations." Tears burned my eyes, not from sadness, but relief. For the first time in years, I felt safe, seen. Later, as I sat alone on the balcony, wrapped in a soft throw blanket, city wind brushing my hair, I whispered to the night, "How did I end up here? John, did you send him to me today?" Something in my chest answered not words, but warmth. I didn't know then what truths were waiting to surface. I didn't know contracts held secrets, or that my signature had been used for things I never agreed to. I didn't know betrayal had been unfolding quietly long before the moment they told me to leave. But I was about to find out. I hardly slept that first night. Not because the bed was unfamiliar, it was soft, warmer than the basement cot I'd been using. No, it was my mind. A whirlpool of faces, memories, questions circling without rest. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering, how did my son become someone who saw me as a burden? When did love turn into inconvenience? Dawn broke in shades of gold through the curtains. I wrapped myself in a plush robe provided in the closet, soft as clouds, and walked to the kitchen where Richard was already pouring coffee. The aroma, rich, dark, comforting, filled the air. "Good morning," he said gently, handing me a mug. "Thank you," I whispered. The first sip warmed every aching part of me. We sat at the island, the city waking beneath us like distant ocean waves of traffic. For a long while, we just listened to the quiet. It felt sacred. Then Richard cleared his throat. "There's something I want to show you." My stomach tightened. His tone was too careful. He placed a folder on the counter, thick, labeled with sticky notes and date tabs. "I didn't want to overwhelm you yesterday," he continued, "but after you called me last week, I asked my attorney to look into certain records related to John's company. I had suspicions." I frowned, eyebrows knitting. Suspicions. He opened the folder to reveal stacks of papers, contracts, signed documents, financial statements, all with my name typed neatly at the bottom. My hand trembled as I traced the printed letters Maria Rossi followed by a signature. My signature, or something like it. "I never signed these," I breathed. Richard nodded slowly. "I know." He slid another document forward, a transfer authorization. 3 years ago, right after I sold my house. The authorization stated that I voluntarily transferred all remaining company ownership rights and residual assets to Mark Rossi, my own son, as gift. My vision blurred. The kitchen floor seemed to tilt beneath me. I didn't give him that, I whispered. I would never. "I know," Richard said again, voice firm now. "I believe Mark or someone acting on his behalf forged your signature." My knees weakened. I gripped the counter to stay upright. "Heather," I muttered. The name tasted like rust. She always handled the paperwork, said it was simpler if she managed things. She told me to sign routine insurance forms once. She distracted me, kept chatting while I scribbled my initials. I didn't read everything. Shame stabbed deep. Had I been naive, too trusting love makes us blind, yes, but I never imagined deceit this cold, this calculated. I sank onto a stool head in my hands. Richard stepped closer, resting a hand gently on my shoulder. "You're not foolish, Maria. You trusted your family because that's what good mothers do. You gave them everything. They abused that trust." My throat tightened. A tear slid down, warm against my cheek. Why would he take it? The money, the rights, everything. Richard inhaled deeply. "Because the company was worth more than you thought. When John passed, you inherited 40% ownership, quiet dividends, shares, licensing rights. They were supposed to secure your retirement." 40%, I blinked. "John always said our work is our legacy. But I thought he only meant memories." How much I forced the words out. Richard hesitated, then answered. "At the time of the transfer, about 1.2 million, today closer to 1.8. I felt like the wind had been knocked from my lungs. 1.8 million, I repeated, barely audible. He nodded. And suddenly, the basement room, the chores, the dismissive looks, the "she's a burden" comment, the nursing home suggestion, it all clicked like a puzzle snapping together. They didn't want to take care of me. They wanted me out of the picture. The truth hit me like cold water. "They stole from me," I whispered. But this time, it wasn't grief that filled my chest. It was something sharper, older, buried for years beneath patience and politeness. Anger. Real anger. Richard watched me quietly, letting me sit with the realization, letting it harden rather than evaporate through tears. "What do we do?" I finally asked. His eyes met mine, not pitying, not soft, but steady, respectful. "We fight," he said, "but smartly, legally, strategically. We don't lash out emotionally. We gather proof. We reclaim what was taken." I nodded slowly. My heartbeat steadied. I straightened my spine. I wasn't weak. I wasn't disposable. I wasn't a burden. I was a mother who gave everything. And it was time to take back what was mine. Later that afternoon, I took a walk through the penthouse balcony garden. Ivy climbed warm brick and pots overflowed with rosemary and mint. I plucked a sprig, rubbed it between my fingers, inhaling its familiar scent. It reminded me of Sunday dinners back home. Mark's tiny hand tugging my apron, asking if he could lick the spoon. Where did that little boy go? Maybe he was still somewhere inside the man who told me to get out. Maybe he was buried under Heather's cold influence. Or maybe I had refused to see who he became. I sat on a bench and let tears finally fall freely, not for what I lost, but for the illusion I held on to. In the quiet wind, I whispered apologies to my younger self for ignoring red flags, for staying quiet when I should have spoken, for shrinking myself to fit the corners of a house I paid for. But then I breathed, because now I had a chance to grow back, and this time I would not shrink. That evening, Richard cooked dinner: lemon chicken, roasted potatoes, vegetables drizzled with olive oil. I insisted on helping, but he just laughed and nudged me away gently. "You've cooked for everyone your whole life," he said. "Tonight let someone cook for you." I sat at the table feeling something strange and almost forgotten. Care. Real care. We talked for hours about John, about the early days of the company, about Mark before ambition hardened him. Richard's voice softened when he spoke of my husband. I could tell he missed him too. Then with a sip of wine, Richard said something that made me still. "You know, John left one more thing for you." My heart skipped. "What do you mean?" He looked at me, eyes deep with something unspoken. "A sealed letter," he said, "from him, for you. I've held on to it for years." My breath caught. "A letter," I whispered, voice trembling. He nodded slowly. "I'll give it to you when you're ready." I pressed my hand to my chest. John's words after all these years. My past wasn't done with me yet, and neither was the truth. I didn't sleep much the second night either, only this time it wasn't anguish keeping me awake. It was anticipation, a strange electric feeling under my skin, like I was standing at the edge of something life-changing. My husband had left me a letter, hidden, protected, saved for a moment like this. When the sun rose, I found Richard already awake in the dining room, a leather envelope on the table. My breath hitched. "Is that?" I whispered. He nodded, sliding it toward me. "Only open it when you feel strong enough." Strong. Was I strong? Part of me wanted to rip it open immediately. Another part trembled, afraid of what truths might spill out. Instead, I said softly, "Not yet. If I open it now, I might read it with my wounds. I want to read it with my backbone." Richard smiled proud. Then we wait. Later that morning, we drove downtown, glass towers scraping the sky, sidewalks buzzing with Monday urgency. The law office smelled of polished wood and expensive cologne. A receptionist with red lipstick and perfect posture offered coffee I was too nervous to drink. Then the man who could change everything walked in. Attorney Michael Graves, mid-50s, steel gray hair, eyes sharp enough to slice lies in half. He shook my hand firmly. "Mrs. Rossi, I'm honored to represent you." I felt small for a moment, just an older woman in a borrowed coat. But when Richard placed a reassuring hand on my back, I remembered I am not powerless. Michael spread the documents Richard had gathered across the conference table: forged signatures, ownership transfers, corporate filings. He examined every line expression, tightening. "This is bad," he muttered, "for them." I let out a shaky breath. "You understand," Michael continued, leaning forward. "If we pursue this, it won't just be a financial dispute. Forgery on estate documents is a felony. Whoever did this could face serious prison time." My pulse quickened. Prison. My own son could go to prison. Michael noticed my hesitation. His tone softened. "You don't have to decide today. But I will ask you one question, and you must answer honestly. Do you want justice or do you want peace?" His words hit like a bell ringing in the center of my chest. Justice or peace? Could I choose both? "I want dignity," I finally said. "I want my name back, my rights, and I want my son to look me in the eye one day and realize what he threw away." Michael nodded slowly. Then we proceed. When we left the building, a storm had rolled in dark clouds, heavy like uncried tears. Rain tapped the pavement rhythmically, echoing the pounding in my heart. Richard held an umbrella over us, but the truth grief still soaked through me. Because no matter how strong I pretended to be, I missed my son. His laughter as a child, his freckles, the way he cried at movies and hugged me too tight during thunderstorms. But he hadn't hugged me like that in years. Somewhere between success and ambition, love had slipped through his fingers, and I let it slip too. Maybe we both failed. That evening, I found myself alone in the guest room, the leather envelope resting on my lap. My fingers traced its edges, gentle as if touching memory itself. I inhaled deeply and broke the seal. Inside was a single handwritten letter, my husband's familiar slanted script. Maria, if you are reading this, I'm gone, and it means one thing. You must fight for yourself now. Tears blurred the ink. He wrote about the nights we stayed up dreaming of building a company together, about how he always admired my strength more than I ever did. He wrote that the 40% ownership was mine, not out of obligation, but because he trusted me to endure when he could no longer protect me. Do not give away what we built, he wrote, and if someone tries to take it, burn their bridges behind you. I pressed the letter to my heart until it wrinkled sob, breaking free from somewhere deep, grief, love, pain, pride, all tangled. When I finally looked up, I wasn't the same woman who entered that basement weeks ago. I was someone reborn through truth. The next morning, we went shopping. Yes, shopping. Not for jewelry, not for glamour, but for armor. Clothes that didn't whisper old lady in the way, but rather woman rising. I chose a navy blazer sharp as resolve pearl earrings that shimmered with quiet authority, and a haircut that dusted my shoulders like freedom. When I looked in the mirror, I saw her. The woman my husband believed I could be. The woman my son underestimated. The woman Heather should never have crossed. That afternoon, we returned to the house. Not with tears. With evidence, with intent, with calm fire in my veins. Mark answered the door. His expression shifted confusion to annoyance to discomfort as he recognized my confidence. "Mom," he muttered, "what are you doing here?" I stepped inside before he could block the way. Heather appeared at the top of the stairs, arms crossed, lips curled. "Oh, look," she said, voice dripping with sugar poison the runaway returns. I met her gaze without flinching. "I'm not here for your approval, Heather. I'm here for the truth." She scoffed, but I held up a folder, thick, bound, my weapon. Mark's face drained of color. "What's that?" he asked carefully. "Proof," I said softly. "Proof of forgery, proof of financial transfer, proof of theft." His jaw flexed. Heather froze. "And I'm giving you one last chance," I continued, voice steady, though my heart thrashed to talk to me face to face as mother and son before lawyers enter this home instead. Silence hung heavy. Mark looked at Heather. She looked away, and for the first time in years, I saw doubt crack her pretty mask. I placed the folder on the dining table, slow, intentional, like laying a sword between two generals before war. "You can sit with me now," I said softly, "or you can sit with a judge later." Heather stepped back. Mark swallowed. "Mom, please, can we talk alone?" A spark, small but real. Maybe not all was lost. Maybe there was still a road back, though the path ahead was lined with broken glass. That night back at Richard's, I reread the letter before bed. One line echoed louder than the rest. "Diamonds are made under pressure, Maria. Let this pressure polish you, not break you." I placed the letter on the nightstand, exhaled slowly, and finally slept. Deep, dreamless, strengthened. Because tomorrow the real battle would begin. The next day, Mark actually came to Richard's office. I almost didn't recognize him. His shoulders sagged, there were dark hollows under his eyes, and he twisted his car keys like a nervous kid. "Mom," he said, voice rough, "Heather thinks I shouldn't be here." Of course she did. I nodded at the chair across from me. "Sit." He dropped into it, staring at the table. Michael, my attorney, sat at my right with a stack of folders. Richard stood by the window. For a moment, no one spoke. Then I slid one sheet across the table, the transfer authorization with my forged signature. Mark's jaw flexed. His eyes moved over the page slowly as if the words might change. "You did this?" I asked quietly. No yelling. Just a mother asking if her son had signed her life away. He swallowed. Heather said, It was to simplify things. The estate, the taxes. She said you didn't understand that stuff. She told me you'd already signed everything. I didn't, I said. And you never checked. You just let my name be used. He closed his eyes. I thought it was mine anyway. I rebuilt the company after Dad died. You didn't even want to deal with it. Your father left you 40%, I said. He left me 40. He trusted me. You decided that wasn't enough. He had no answer. Michael spoke calm. Mr. Rossi forging your mother's signature on estate documents is fraud. If she presses charges, you could be facing a felony. Mark went gray. Prison. I watched panic flash through his eyes and felt a twist of satisfaction and grief. This frightened man was the same boy who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. I don't want you in prison, I said. I want you to be a man I can respect, a father your kids can look up to. Right now, I tapped the paper. This isn't it. He dragged a hand over his face. I need time. Heather, she's gonna lose it. Maybe that's the problem, I said. You care more about how she reacts than about what's right. He didn't argue. He just stood and left. The door closed with a soft click that sounded like a crack in glass. He's scared, Michael said. Fear can make people cooperate. Or do something stupid, Richard murmured. 2 days later, I saw what stupid looked like in Heather's hands. I was stirring a pot of soup when Richard's phone buzzed. He checked the screen, frowned, and passed it to me. It's Graves. My stomach nodded. Hello? Maria Michael said, voice tight, Don't panic, but Heather just filed for a temporary restraining order against you. My grip tightened. Against me. She's claiming harassment threats and that your presence harms the children. Hearings in 3 days. The spoon slipped into the pot. She's trying to keep me from my grandkids, I whispered. Yes, he said, exactly. The kitchen blurred. I braced a hand on the counter. We'll fight it, Michael went on. But you have to stay calm in that courtroom. No reacting to her bait. You think you can do that? I wiped a tear with the heel of my hand. I've swallowed worse, I said. I can swallow this, too. Family court was beige walls, bad lighting, and people clutching folders and heartbreak. Heather arrived in a cream cardigan and Flat's hair pulled back, makeup soft, every inch the worried suburban mom. Mark walked beside her, eyes on the floor. I stood with Michael navy blazer buttoned hands laced so no one would see them shake. When our case was called, we stepped into a small courtroom. The judge, a woman around my age with iron gray hair and sharp eyes, looked like she'd seen every kind of mess. Heather's attorney began, Your Honor, my client has been living in fear. Her mother-in-law shows up unannounced, tells her she belongs in prison, and discusses these issues in front of the children. They've been having nightmares. Mrs. Rossi is using legal threats to terrorize this family. I bit the inside of my cheek. The judge turned to me. Mrs. Rossi, did you tell your daughter-in-law you thought she belonged in prison? Yes, Your Honor, I said. Heather's lawyer almost smiled. But I wasn't threatening her, I added. I was talking about consequences. I recently learned she sold jewelry that belonged to my mother and kept the money. I told her that when people steal, prison is sometimes where they end up. The almost smile vanished. Michael rose. Your Honor, we have documentation of financial irregularities, but we'll address those separately. Regarding the children, we've provided records of missed pickups and tardies and statements showing that Mrs. Rossi has been their most consistent caregiver for the last 3 years. He handed the judge a folder. She skimmed it, expression unreadable. Heather's attorney huffed. This is an attempt to smear my client. It's context, Michael said. Enough, the judge cut in. The room went still. I pictured my grandchildren's faces. The thought of being erased from their lives pressed on my chest. Finally, the judge spoke. I am not persuaded that Mrs. Rossi presents a physical danger, she said. However, it's clear this family is in high conflict and the children are caught in the middle. My heart thudded. I am denying the request for a full protective order, she continued. My knees loosened in relief. But for now, she added, to reduce conflict contact between Mrs. Rossi and the grandchildren will be limited to 1 supervised visit per week in a neutral location. Mrs. Rossi is not to go to the family residence. Heather exhaled like she'd just scored a victory. Mark finally looked at me. Shame sat heavy in his eyes. The gavel came down. Just like that, I became a visitor in my grandchildren's lives. In the hallway, I leaned against the wall. "I lost," I whispered. Michael shook his head. "She tried to erase you. You're still there, and we haven't even touched the fraud yet." Richard set a warm hand between my shoulders. "She swung first," he said. "Now it's your turn." That night, I sat on the penthouse balcony, city lights shimmering. The wind was cool on my face, but something hot burned in my chest. Heather had gone for my grandkids. She'd used the system like a weapon and thought she'd won. She thought I'd crawl away and accept my 1 hour a week like charity. She didn't understand. I was done begging for a place at a table I helped build. From here on out, I wasn't defending anymore. I was going to attack. For a week, I tried to breathe like someone who only gets 1 hour of sunlight. One supervised visit every Saturday in a noisy library playroom with cheap plastic chairs and a tired social worker watching from the corner. But when my grandchildren ran toward me that first Saturday, Anna's pigtails bouncing, little Leo clutching the drawing he made for Nonna, I nearly collapsed. They wrapped themselves around my legs like they were afraid I might disappear. "Nonna, are you sick?" Leo asked, eyes wide. "Mom said you can't come home because you yell." I felt my heart rip in half. I bent down, kissed his forehead. "No, baby. I'm not sick, and I'm not going anywhere." We sat on the library rug. Anna brushed my hair with a toy comb. Leo leaned into my side. The social worker didn't once have to intervene. But when the hour was up, when the buzzer signaled, and I watched them walk away, holding Heather's hand, I knew I would burn the world to get them back. That Monday, Michael arrived with a thick binder under his arm. The forensic accountant finished his report, he said, as we gathered at Richard's long marble dining table. My pulse quickened. I set down my tea. "Tell me," I said. He opened the binder like it was an ancient weapon being unsheathed. Over the last 3 years, he began $740,000 has been siphoned from the company. My mouth fell open. "Wait," I said, clutching the table edge. "I thought it was 300,000. Michael's eyes gleamed. That was only what we saw initially. The accountant dug deeper. Heather created shell vendors, fake consulting contracts, personal expenses disguised as corporate assets, luxury handbags, hotel stays, spa retreats, private Pilates training, even a designer crib that never existed. Anger surged hot through my veins. "And Mark," I whispered. "He signed everything blindly." Richard leaned forward, meaning Heather orchestrated it. Michael nodded. "Most transfers went into an account under Heather's maiden name. In addition, he flipped a page. There is evidence she forged your signature not once, but 4 times. The room blurred for a second. I clutched my chest. "She used me," I said, "as a silent bank." "No more silence," Michael replied. Then he slid a second document across the table. "What's this?" I asked. "Leverage," he said simply. "A private investigator report, photos, screenshots. Heather at a bar, Heather leaving a hotel, Heather kissing a man with tattoo sleeves and a smirk, corner booth, hands where no happily married woman's hands should be. Proof of affair, proof of deception, proof of parenting negligence, missed pickups, daycare late fees, Leo wandering outside the gym while she flirted with her trainer. It was all here. And suddenly I didn't feel weak. I felt powerful. Like I'd been gathering arrows without realizing it, and now finally I had a bow. Michael looked directly at me. "Maria, we can file criminal charges. Fraud, embezzlement, forgery, custodial negligence. But I want to hear it from your own mouth. What do you want?" I closed my eyes. I saw my grandchildren laughing in my kitchen years ago. I saw Mark as a toddler covered in cookie dough. I saw him at graduation teary-eyed hugging me like I hung the moon. I saw the man who told me I was a burden. Then slowly I opened my eyes. "I want my ownership back," I said. "I want my rights, my share, my dignity. I want custody rights to my grandchildren restored. And Mark, he needs help, not ruin. I'll give him a chance to stand beside me, not over me." Michael's lips curved not a smile but approval. And Heather, I didn't blink. I want her out of our lives. Richard placed his hand over mine, his voice warm, steady. And you won't be fighting alone. 2 days later, the war began. We summoned Mark to a meeting neutral ground Michael's office again. When he arrived, Heather hovered behind him like a vulture in heels. She smirked. Let's make this quick. I have Pilates in an hour. Michael's eyebrow arched. You may want to reschedule that. He clicked the projector remote. Slide 1, forged signature documentation. Heather's face twitched. Mark's throat bobbed. Slide 2, financial transfers into Heather's private accounts. Slide 3, the hotel photos. Heather's lips parted, air stuck in her lungs. Slide 4, daycare negligence report. Slide 5, child services observation notes. When it was done, silence fell like a hammer. Heather stood too quickly. You set me up. You stalked me. You stole from me, I said calmly. You forged my signature. You took my home, my money, my access to my grandchildren. You tried to legally erase me. No more. Mark covered his face, shaking. Heather, tell me this is fake. All of it. Her eyes darted, calculating, not remorseful, only afraid of the consequences. You don't understand, she hissed. We needed money. The business was failing. And your solution was Cancun and designer handbags, Michael snapped. Heather pointed at me. This is because she wants control. She wants to destroy us. No, I said softly. I want accountability. Michael slid one final document forward, a settlement proposal. If you agree to divorce, he told Mark, and sign over managerial control and return Maria's ownership, the criminal charges can be converted into a civil settlement. Heather will be fully liable for embezzled funds. She avoids prison if she complies. If not, he tapped the binder of evidence. She stands trial. Heather's voice cracked. Mark, don't sign anything. Mark stared at the papers a long time. His eyes glistened. He looked at me not like an enemy, but like a son finally seeing the wreckage. Mom, he whispered, voice broken. I'm sorry, I didn't know how bad it was. I let her steer everything. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought you were fine. I swallowed. I wasn't fine, Mark. I was surviving, not living. He nodded, trembling. Then he picked up the pen. Heather screamed, "Don't you dare!" But he did. He signed. Heather lunged for him, but Richard stepped between them like a wall. Security escorted her out as she hurled insults and threats that bounced off the glass door like small stones. The moment she was gone, Mark crumpled forward and sobbed. I moved slowly, like approaching a wounded animal, and wrapped my arms around him. His weight collapsed into me. I know, I whispered. I know, baby. We're going to fix this. Together. He cried harder. Not as a man ruined, but as a child finally forgiven. For the first time in years, hope didn't feel like foolishness. It felt like sunrise. Healing is never a straight path. It isn't a door you walk through once it steps. Small ones, sometimes shaking, sometimes backward, but steps nonetheless. After Mark signed the settlement, everything moved like dominoes, tipping one after another. Heather tried to appeal. She screamed, threatened, cried in court hallways. But evidence is louder than tears, and the law does not bend to crocodile sobs. The embezzlement charges were filed formally. Her name joined documents she could never outrun. Eventually, she accepted the settlement terms. Maybe because prison terrified her more than pride. Maybe because the other man she thought she could run to disappeared the moment money dried up. Loyalty funded by bank transfers always evaporates when the account hits zero. She moved out of the house, my house packed in a single U-Haul that looked far smaller than her confidence once had. Mark stayed behind alone. A grown man in too big a house, sitting in silence, he now finally had to face. I didn't rush to fill it for him. I gave him space to learn how to live without someone controlling him. And I learned how to live without someone draining me. 3 months passed. The supervised visits were lifted when the judge reviewed our progress. When she saw photos of Leo sleeping peacefully in my arms, video of Anna giggling as she helped me bake cookies, statements from their teachers that the children were calmer, happier, brighter. The judge simply said this family is rebuilding and granted shared custody access back to Mark with me listed as the primary caretaker every other weekend. I cried that night, not tears of pain, tears of arrival, tears that tasted like finally. Mark began therapy, individual sessions at first, then family ones with me. He arrived with shoulders tense, using jokes to avoid real confrontation. But slowly, he cracked open. I thought needing help made me weak, he told me once, voice raw after a session. But staying blind made me weaker. Progress is not dramatic like movies show. It was slower, human, beautiful. He started cooking again, burning the chicken the first 3 times before calling me to laugh about it. He took Leo to soccer practice without Heather nagging him. He read bedtime stories to Anna. His voice wasn't perfect. It wavered. But children sense effort more than perfection. One Saturday evening after dropping the kids at my place, he lingered at the door. "Mom," he said softly, "you look happy here." I looked around the penthouse, warm lighting a puzzle half finished on the table, pasta dough resting on the counter, Richard setting wine glasses while humming Sinatra, and smiled. "I am." He nodded slowly. "I want that too." "And you will," I said, touching his cheek. "One careful step at a time." He leaned into my hand like he used to as a boy. For a moment, he wasn't a man burdened by shame. He was my child again. 6 months later, our lives looked different. Not perfect, but real. Heather completed her community service sentence cleaning a public daycare. Irony has a sense of humor. She no longer had access to Mark's accounts. She worked part-time as a receptionist. Her designer handbags were gone auctioned to repay damages. I heard whispers she blamed me for everything, that she rehearsed revenge scenarios. But whispers have no teeth when truth has already bitten harder. Richard's company lawyers finalized the reinstatement of my 40% ownership. For the first time in my life, I received dividends under my name. The check was more money than I had ever held at once. I expected joy. Instead, I cried for the woman who once clipped coupons while unknowingly owning a fortune. I bought nothing extravagant, no diamonds, no cars, no designer heels. Just a new kitchen table, long wooden with room for every person I love. Because my wealth was not the money, it was the seat at that table. And I finally had mine back. One Sunday afternoon, everyone gathered at my new house, not a mansion, but a warm home, filled with rosemary plants, framed photos, kids' drawings, and laughter loud enough to shake windows. Leo and Anna cracked eggs into a bowl, splattering more onto the counter than inside. Mark chopped vegetables, too slow, too careful, but trying. Richard stirred the sauce, throwing in extra garlic because he knows I like it that way. As we sat together with pasta and candles glowing, Mark raised his glass. "To Mom," he said, voice thick, "for not giving up on us even when we deserved it the least." Glasses clinked. My heart trembled. "For learning," I added. "For healing, for second chances done right." After dinner, the kids begged for a story. We sat on the rug. Anna crawled into my lap. Leo leaned against my shoulder. Mark sat beside us. Richard wrapped an arm around me like a promise without words. I opened the letter my husband wrote again, creases soft from all the times I've touched it. I read it aloud, voice steady. "You are stronger than you know," John wrote, "and one day you will shine in ways the world can't ignore." I looked around. He was right. They thought age made me fragile, that love made me blind, that kindness made me weak. But I am a woman who survived storms, betrayal, courtrooms, and heartbreak. I am a mother who fought to reclaim dignity, a grandmother who refused to lose her family, a widow who learned love can come twice if you open the door again. I left my son's house with one suitcase. I came back with power, peace, and my name restored. I am no one's burden. I am a diamond cut-scarred, unbreakable, shining brighter than before. If you're listening to this story right now, tell me, where are you watching from? What part of my journey touched your heart? Leave a comment below, I read everyone. Like this video if it gave you strength. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next story. We share powerful stories every day to remind you that it's never too late to start again. Thank you for staying with me until the end.